Welcome back to another episode of Malcolm on Money, where we decode some of the more complex financial topics that folks tend to run into in an attempt to simplify it and make it as plain as possible. Today, what we'll be talking about is how to talk to your kids about money. And this is at any age, because as you can imagine, one of the questions I get asked the most is, how do I talk to my kids about money? Whether it's 4 years old or 5 years old, all the way up to even 45 years old. The question is always the same. How do I introduce the topic of money to my children? And the short answer is to simply start talking, right? There's no perfect right answer or silver bullet solution that's going to take your kid from someone who's never interacted with money before or someone who you think is terrible with money, from there all the way to someone who's suddenly Warren Buffett. That's not going to happen overnight. But the reality is that as soon as you open up the door to the conversation and you make it clear to them why you're talking about it and why now, they'll come with all sorts of questions you've been wishing they would ask. And it's up to you just how much personal info you feel comfortable sharing. Not everyone wants their kids to know precisely how much money they see come in from their paycheck every other week or how much is sitting in their Roth IRA. But it couldn't hurt to give them at least a general range of what you're invested in inside of that IRA, for example. Or give them a general idea of what a person who does what you do for a living makes for doing that work. So one of my favorite answers to give whenever I'm asked how to introduce the topic of money to children is to recommend that you read a book together. Literally everyone reading the same book together. Even get grandma and grandpa in on it if you can. For instance, one book that I love for children ages 10 and up is The Motley Fool Investment Guide for Teens. This is a book that, don't be fooled by the title, okay? I've had people in their 60s and 70s tell me how much they love this book, okay? It's written in plain English so that a fifth grader can understand it, and there's not a ton of jargon without a corresponding definition to go with it. This is a book that's an easy read, easily digestible, okay? So by reading a book like this as a family, it gives your kids a chance to ask their questions, and if you don't know the answers yourself, you get to go on a Googling journey together as a family. How beautiful is that, right? Another way to introduce the topic of money to your kids is to ask them a series of pre-planned questions designed to inspire dialogue about their own experiences with money, whether they are just now getting started learning what money is, or if they've been out of your house for a couple of decades. You'll just want to adapt these questions for whichever stage of life your kids are in today. But I'm going to give you some of my favorites, 10 of my favorite questions to ask. You don't have to ask them completely in a series. You don't have to ask them all at once. These are 10 questions that I love that just open up the conversation for families and give you an opportunity to learn exactly what you've already passed along, what you need to be passing along, what you might be able to learn from your kids they picked up somewhere, all that good stuff. So the first question on that list is very simply, what do you like about money? And a follow-up to that one maybe is, what's important to you about money? You'd be surprised where that question alone can take you in a conversation with a super young person or someone in their 30s or 40s. The next question I'd ask is there anything about money that scares you? And this is a great one because it gives you the opportunity, again, to understand what might be paralyzing them when it comes to managing their own money or keeping them from actually executing on some of their own financial goals that you might not even know that exist. Another one is, what is your earliest memory of money? This is a great one. And for those of you who have super young kids like me, maybe they're just now creating their earliest memories of money, but it's still a good question to ask in a way because it gives you the opportunity to know exactly what matters to them and what they're picking up on now. But for those of you who have kids in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, great question to start to dig into what really started to shape and mold the way that they think about and interact with money today. So the earliest possible memory you have at all ever, what was that earliest memory that you have? And then, do you remember me and your mom or dad talking about money? Great question. Follow up to that is, what was that like for you? And just see where they take it. Like maybe you guys argued all the time, or maybe you guys never talked about it at all, or anything related to it. Just see where they take you and have the conversation in whatever direction it goes. Another one that's great is, compared to your friends at school, would you say that you were one of the rich kids or one of the poor kids? And if they're older, obviously you could ask back when you were in middle school. or elementary school. And if they're in elementary school or middle school or high school, whatever, you can ask, compared to the kids at your school today, would you say that you are one of the rich kids or one of the poor kids? And you want to give those two extremes. You don't want to give them a middle ground to take, because 9 times out of 9, they're definitely going to take that middle ground to make it. You want to know, do you think that they're poor in comparison to their friends or rich in comparison to their friends? And then you want to ask, what age were you when it became apparent that you were one of the poor kids? Or what age were you when it became apparent you were one of the rich kids? And then why is that? What is the thing that gave you the impression that you were or are one of the rich kids, or that you were or are one of the poor kids? And see where that conversation goes. Continue to ask probing questions in whatever direction they decide to go with that, just to really find out what societal information outside of your house has given them the impression that they fell in that spectrum. And then also, can you remember a story about how you knew that you were one of the people who was doing well or doing poorly? And then maybe even, can you remember a story that gave you the impression that people were doing better than we were, or that we were doing better than other people? And see what stories, what memory is triggered there. And then from a purely financial perspective, what does enough look like to you? That to me is a great question, especially to be asking older kids, adult kids that have the capacity to understand that enough point, right? How much home is enough home? Do you really need the biggest, baddest mega mansion on the block? Or are you okay with a nice enough house in a nice enough neighborhood that has the things that you need and allows you comfort? How much car is enough car? Or do you really need the biggest, baddest thing that Mercedes manufactures, right? How much vacation is enough vacation? Or is it only good if it's super Instagrammable and is going to impress your, 600 followers on Instagram? Like, those are the kinds of things you want to get a feel for, whether they have a concept of what their own personal enough point is. And I know that's going to be a tough one to kind of let them go in that direction without influencing the conversation too much. But I really think it's important there to just let them talk, see what their own enough is. And then you can even ask, how will you know when you have enough? That's kind of how you also can bring it down to the level of the elementary, middle, high schooler, asking them, obviously you're still dependent on mom and dad for your financial resources today. But once you leave our house, how will you know when you have enough? That's another really great one that helps you get a little bit of insight into the psyche of this person that you've raised or you're raising. And then another one is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned so far about money? And that's going to give you a ton of insight into who has the biggest influence on their money decisions, right? Did you learn that lesson from mom? Did you learn that lesson from dad? Did you learn that lesson from TikTok? Did you learn that lesson from Big Bro? Like, where did that insight come from, and who is responsible for implanting that into you? And then lastly, if someone handed you a check for $1,000 today, what would you do with it? Now, the reason that's important at any level, again, is because if your 6, 7, 8-year-old says, I'm going to spend the entire thing inside the Roblox universe, and I'm going to just going to jam it all into my Xbox and, get all the best skins, and that's how then great to know. Perfect point to have a conversation about how much is too much and the value of that dollar in reality versus in the virtual universe. Or if it's, you're a kid that's in their 20s and they said, I'm going to go on a vacation to X, Y, or Z. It gives you an opportunity to understand how they like to travel, they would like to travel, the impact something as simple as $1,000 would have on the life of that 20-something, 30-something, whatever-year-old kid. And if they said, I'm going to save it. Well, why would you save it? What are you saving it for? How would you save it? Where would you put? What kind of account would you put it in? Would you invest it? When you say save, do you mean? So it gives you just another opportunity to really understand the psyche of this person you're talking to and have a chance to really dig in and understand what their drivers are. Okay, folks, that's it for today's episode. Hopefully you learned something new and feel compelled to subscribe and like or whatever else you're supposed to do on here. But more importantly, I hope you found this information valuable enough to share it with someone else you know. And if you'd like to receive more content like this directly to your inbox every week, then be sure to sign up for the Malcolm on Money newsletter at the address in the show notes below. And if you'd like to send us any comments or questions or kudos or ask a question, feel free to shoot us an email at hello@malcolmethridge.com. Again, that web address is hello at malcolmethridge.com. Thanks for watching.